And it's lovely to be here with the Compassionate Ballarat group. And I think it's actually wonderful that Ballarat's formally signed that Charter for Compassion, joining 430 other cities around the world that have as its core tenet that pledge really to identify and to solve social justice issues and through compassionate action. And I feel like this webinar is one of those actions. So I want to thank you, Lynn, for all that you've done in this space. And that sense, I guess, too, of joining this global community that takes the best of sort of modern science and also ancient wisdom practices that help us cultivate compassion and apply them to relieve suffering, in our communities. So it's great to be here. And like you acknowledged, some wonderful speakers over these last 3.5 months, some great tools and insights. And Sam, he began this 3.5 months ago. And in his work, he was really inviting people to build supportive structures and activities that they could build in their lives to help them navigate their way through, this journey of this global pandemic. And in some ways, really today, it's an opportunity to look at what we've been learning, what we've each been learning about ourselves, what daily routines are helpful, what choices we can make that are best for our well-being and our communities. So in terms of the topic for today, I'll just change that slide there. What we're going to be exploring is I've been asked to lead us really in reflection, sort of on a personal level of our own experiences so far, of the good and the bad of COVID-19, and how we might be able to integrate and cultivate the good into our personal lives and into our social relationships as we move forward. And as I've been reflecting on this topic, I've been struck really by just the breadth of human experiences as this pandemic unfolds, both globally but also closer to home. Like, as you all know, the towers in Melbourne, the greater metropolitan area back into stage 3 restrictions. And here we're also reflecting on how the pandemic has affected each of us in unique ways over these past months. And really, COVID-19 has had undeniable and horrific consequences on people's lives, on the economy. People have been of sickness, of death, of unemployment. These rates have soared globally, all around the planet. And actually, it's easy to despair. And when we think about compassion, it's that feeling that arises when we see suffering. A very heartfelt, profound experience, human emotion of that deep empathy. And then that sense of what can we do? What can we do to relieve both our own suffering and the suffering of others? So to date, over 11 million people have caught the virus globally, and over 550,000 people, have died. And there will be more to come. So I thought to begin and take us into this reflective space that I invite you into today, let's begin to take a moment to silently acknowledge the impact of this virus that it's had so far, on humanity. And you might want to close your eyes, you might want to put your hand on your heart, but just taking this moment. It's an invitation really to practice compassion for others and for ourselves, but also to all of nature in its myriad forms. So with that in heart and mind, we'll move forward with this exploration. I guess, as I mentioned, this complex set of conditions that affect our experience of this pandemic to date. So many things would affect each and every one of our experiences: where you live, who you live with, your health status and the status of the health of your friends and your family. What do you do? Are you retired? Are you working? If you're working, are you a frontline worker? Are you an essential service worker? Are you still working maybe but working from home? Some have lost their jobs and their source of stable income. People who are retired, their lives too significantly changed. Many of our regular routines and ways of life, they've been interrupted. There's economic influences, our temperaments, our histories, our personalities, all of these affect our experiences as we live through COVID-19. Where you live comes down to also like our leadership and laws and the directives of our state. This impacts us. And also the profound level of uncertainty about what will be the outcomes of this crisis, both in the short term but also the long term. And really the impacts are immeasurable, and many of them we don't know yet. So although there are diverse impacts on people across the board, as we've been exploring, today we're really going to be keeping our reflections kind of close to home, asking ourselves how it's affected us personally and how we intend to kind of develop our capacity to live as well as we can under these changing conditions and as we move forward. So I think it's really important that the many negative aspects surrounding COVID-19, it's important that we acknowledge them, and to reflect on, our choices, our actions, and to consider what we each can do within our own domains of influence, our influence and control. How do we attend to these difficulties? I think it's also really important, as I've been invited to explore today, to also reflect on any of the positives that has been emerging, and how we can acknowledge these too. What can we take from these tough times? What do we want to do to keep in mind as we move forward? So as Lynn mentioned, I'm a psychologist and I engage with individual psychotherapy with people, and I also offer clinical supervision to a range of other workers, professional people working in the community, be them teachers, nurses, surgeons, so many palliative care worker, people working in mental health, young people, as well as people working with families. And I have to say, what I've witnessed in my practice over these last few months and in my own experiences, as also my other professionals sharing with me, many of us have been experiencing this sense of being on an emotional roller coaster. And I just wonder whether that's true. Does that relate to you? I've had some people, for example, while acknowledging the deep suffering of other people, have actually felt that in their own experience that they've loved some aspects of this new norm. And there's others who've really worked so hard to construct a supportive and meaningful life and have had much of that sort of scaffolding of everyday life just radically changed with profoundly detrimental effects. I've also seen when the restrictions here got lifted that some people were jubilant, like there was so much relief and excitement, and other people were terrified. There was so much fear and anticipation. So this plethora of experiences. But let's now just check in on our own. Let's check in with ourselves about our experience. And we'll do this through a series of guided reflective exercises. So as Lynn mentioned, if you have a pen and paper available or a way of capturing insights, that would be useful. And I also invite you, when we get to this process of contemplation and recording what arose for us, that people are welcome also to put their feedback in the chat forum. So for now, we're going to do a practice, just as a sense of really arriving, a mindfulness practice to kind of set us up for this reflective space. So just becoming aware really of this precise moment in time, that really landing in and tuning into what's happening right now for you. Sensing your experience, the position of your body, perhaps the temperature of the space around you. And, if the mind wanders off, which minds are good to do, if they wander at any time throughout this reflection, just notice that and just gently guide your attention back to the instructions moment to moment. We can continually arrive back really into the present moment again and again by tuning into the body, feeling gravity. feeling where your body makes contact with your environment. And now there's an invitation to feeling the sensation of the breath moving in your body. Just noticing how the body responds as you breathe. And perhaps if you'd like to, you can take a deep breath in. So breathing in deeply, allowing the belly and the abdomen to expand. Perhaps holding the breath for a moment and then breathing out long. And let's do this a couple of more times. So breathing in deeply. And breathing out long. And just knowing that as you breathe out, there's a sense of you're able to letting go, releasing, relaxing into this moment. Allowing yourself to tune into your experience. And also aware of that we're joining with others together here in this webinar. So reorienting yourself back into this moment as you're tuning into the webinar and kind of being connected with your body and your experience will commence this reflective practice. So to begin with, I invite you to begin with thinking about what some of the most difficult aspects for you have been personally of living with the impact of COVID-19. So you might do this as a reflective practice where you kind of close your eyes and contemplate and allow that question to be central. You know, what's been the most difficult for you personally as we've lived through this and as we prepare to live beyond? And some challenging memories and reflections might arise, and if that does happen, that suffering, you can tune into offering yourself some self-compassion. Sometimes that sense of putting your hand on your heart and breathing easy. So if you feel as if you'd like to, you can begin to kind of capture some of the reflections that have happened for you. What's arisen for you about some of these challenges? I know that through my own experience and reading, preparing for today, and talking to many of my clients and many other professionals working with clients in the community, for many, the support structures that have changed, going to the gym, going to a meditation class, going to a yoga class, a gardening group, a walking program, all of these sort of structures that people have set up to bring meaning and value into their lives, many of those structures have fallen away. So for some, that's been really hard. Also for some, kind of the physical distancing and the kind of rules around that. For some, that's been really hard. Practicing social isolation has for some been really challenging. What about for you? I know that many people's lives have been interrupted. They haven't been able to engage in, really important rites of passage. Weddings, funerals, births, birthdays, celebrations, holidays, vacations, things they were looking forward to. Some people, at times are feeling really angry and frustrated. And of course, fear of the uncertainty. A very common experience. And there's also often an overwhelming amount of information that's coming to us both locally, nationally, internationally. All these big changes. So having really recognised the challenges, now let's see what we can do around recognising how we've managed, how we're actually working to support ourselves through this. So I'm just going to change to the next slide where we're going to reflect upon a couple of these questions. What have been some of your most beneficial coping strategies? Like, how have you managed so far? Let's reflect on that. What strengths, what skills have you employed, over this time? Again, feel free as thoughts arise to capture them. Feel free to, if you'd like, to offer something in the chat function. There's so many qualities that you might have brought into play at different times. Patience, maybe grit, determination, perhaps creativity, perhaps adaptability, flexibility. What people have been helpful, what relationships have been important, what resources have been important, what's been helpful, what actions have you taken, what routines are you establishing, what attitudes might be helpful, what daily practices support you. So capturing that. Because it's really important, I think, for us to remember that it's often through those very hard times that we grow strong. There's opportunities for developing our resiliency. We hold those pairs of opposites, like this real profound struggle sometimes, but also what we bring to bear, to meet the challenges of those moments. And in some sense, today is about really consolidating those, because this is not over. We want to strengthen our capacity to live skillfully for ourselves and also for others. Taking this reflection another step, I want us to think about this sense of what do you want to cultivate? What do you want to take forward with you? What do you want to continue to strengthen in you? These might be inner resources, like qualities of perseverance or determination or compassion or gentleness, kindness, whatever they might be, that's going to help. And they can also be outer resources, like our relationships, the information we seek, the external structures in our lives. All these things can be really important. And this word cultivate is actually one of my favourite words, to be honest, because it means to attend to the growth of something, to cultivate the soil, to pull weeds and plant flowers, like to actually engage in building this life. And we want to cultivate ways to manage the challenges of living during and beyond this pandemic. So let's take some moments, really think about what do you want to take forward? What do you want to remember? What are some of the positives that can come out of this for you that you can cultivate? I know that for some, that sense of absence makes the heart grow fonder. Like I know a lot of people have really tuned into, dropping out of the business of their daily lives to just how important some of their relationships and friendships are in their lives. So I know a lot of people are cultivating and attending to genuine relationships. I know that other people are finding new connections through this, like I know Ballarat's had a wonderful online choir and creative Ballarat, some wonderful opportunities for people to engage. Book clubs online, families and friends having Zoom parties. These are all things we can do on purpose, to cultivate these connections. And there's innovations that are really building from this whole longing really to stay connected to people and to help each other. Some people are finding gratitude and some deep appreciation in simple things. I love taking walks of appreciation, just, hang a lap around the block and notice there's a beautiful deep red blossom that has just come out in the last few days, and it's gorgeous. I'm going to take a moment to linger longer, in some of those beautiful moments of life. The benefits for the environment, I know that for many that's been a really beautiful thing to see dolphins in Venice and the canals in Venice and other beautiful things, less pollution. How do we take this forward? What kind of routines do we want to create? What resources do we need? Realising really this, wanting to build our capacity for resilience. And I want to give credit really to each and every one of you, for the coping strategies, the resourcefulness that you've already employed when you've been dealing with these difficulties, and blessings to this journey of kind of building helpful resources and resilience. And knowing that really this process it's a marathon, isn't it? It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. So we can cultivate and manage this over time. So we wanted to open it up now, really for any questions that people have or offerings that people have about, what's arisen for you, reflecting on the challenges and also reflecting on the resources that you've brought to this and what you want to take forward with you as we move forward. So if there's any questions there, Lynn, I'm more than happy to answer those.
Thank you, Kate. That was just wonderful. It was a perfect ending to this series, and I think, as you say, this is a marathon, and we need the skills that are going to take us, beyond just holding and hoping that, this is going to be over sooner rather than later. They are skills that we don't get, that if, unless we go to yoga classes or, a number of those other areas, that they are things that we have to cultivate ourselves and in our families. And so one of the things that really Compassionate Ballarat's wanting to do is make sure that we have these more into the community, and that's why we are very pleased to link with the gallery in creating the art and empathy tours. They were a wonderful way in which we were able to take those into the community. And to be able to really have those reflection questions, I think is really important, because they just set us, allowing us to review and reflect on how we're supporting ourselves. If people have questions or, I suppose one of the ones was for me was around, that you can do it for a little while and then it becomes harder. The longer we're asked to do it, the harder it becomes. So I was wondering about that. How we, everyone perhaps on this call, what's one thing that we can be doing that supports our neighbourhoods or our families over the next few, say 6 weeks, because we know that's one area of time that we've got to get through. But and I suppose even just that, not saying we have to get through it, like we'll just hold ourselves here. It's like every day, what are the things that we can be supporting ourselves to do, in this mindset, I suppose, of this is an ongoing thing, not something with a clear end date.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that comes to mind for me, Lynn, is sort of perseverance and kind of focused commitment. It does take energy, doesn't it? And it's sort of how do we sustain and maintain that? So I often think about the word nourishment, like what can nourish me, for the long haul, but also nourish others. So, because that's sort of a replenishing, a kind of keeping the battery full. for the long term. So I think that's one thing. Where do you take refuge? Where do you get renewal, both individually and collectively? Because I think, it takes energy. So we sort of have to keep our batteries being charged, in a sense.
Yes, well, I think I might have mentioned to you that at the time of 9/11, and there was concern around the world at that time. We weren't sure if that was the beginning of a whole range of, sort of attacks or whether it was one-off. And I went to a talk at the time by someone who did work in global trauma, and he said the things that we do in our daily lives to sustain us in our daily lives over the small things that upset us are exactly the same things we need to do at times of the bigger trauma. And so that was very reassuring, because I sort of felt, well, I know what I do to support myself, in the day-to-day things. So knowing that they're also the things that are going to support me in bigger traumas was quite comforting. And so
Family. I've just seen here too that Mary has mentioned that she had a really significant event that occurred that has a hardship really, that through that hardship she said that she learned a great deal about resilience in the process. So those big events, 9/11 and what we're going through, and those individual events, those challenges, how do we kind of grow from them? But what you're saying there, Lynn, is that there's big things and small things, but collectively those things together, make a difference. There's actually, I'm plugging a book only because it's one of my favourite books. It's just here on my desk, but it's called Resilient. So Mary, this book is an amazing book by a guy called Rick Hanson, and he's about this whole idea of cultivating these inner strengths. So, and they are those small things that you're talking about, but they have a big impact. So that book I would highly recommend. Rick Hanson's work, Resilient.
Yeah, Rick Hanson's, he does lots of good work, and of course there's lots of resources online as well for his work, and so I also have just ordered another book by Roman Krasnarek, who does a lot of work on empathy and talks about, what sort of ancestors will we be for people in the future. And I think that's an important way. It's sort of getting that perspective, isn't it, around what we're facing now will be talked about in the future, and how we support ourselves through it. I think will be something that's looked at in the future. So supporting ourselves and supporting others, I think, is an important. Not just to get through, but to really sort of still maintain the communities that we want, that we want to create.
Absolutely, living intentionally, with what we've got.
So much.
Thank you so much, Lynn, and thank you to everybody too. It's been really nice to join with you and all the good work you guys are up to.
So because this is our last webinar, I wanted to take a moment to thank all those people who have been on the journey with us. In particular, Heath and Naomi, our wonderful IT people who have been with us every week. For Judy, who's provided many of the expert speakers and assisted us with media. Ballarat Council, who supports the work of Compassionate Ballarat and has shared information on these webinars through social media. Mary Hollick, who worked with me in organising the webinars. Denise White, who's done all the marketing for the webinars. And the presenters, for each of the presenters, for the effort that they've put in tailoring their presentations to address our our COVID concerns. And also the courier who have been amazing in running stories on most of these webinars for 3.5 months. We hope that the forums have supported you, and if you've missed any session, all those presentations will be up on our website shortly. And we're also, with the generous support of the Buninyong Community Bank, going to be creating a CD from some of these presentations, along with music from Michael Westlake and Joe Crichton that we had a couple of weeks ago, and some of the mindfulness practices. We do trust that over the extended uncertain time ahead, that we can all hold each other, being reminded of the importance of developing a nurturing city, which is what Compassionate Ballarat is all about. Stay connected to us. We will continue to update our webpage with important information on the needs of our community, including on food and shelter. And I'm reminded of the quote by Hugh Mackay, who in his webinar talked about creating the types of community that support our well-being as engaging in the civilising power of compassion. And that is most needed at this time. So our website is compassionateballarat.com.au, and you can register on that to go onto our newsletter. So thank you, everyone, and yeah, we look forward to being in touch again, and yeah, take care. Thank you again to Kate. Thank you. Bye now. Bye, everyone.
My pleasure. Thank you. Bye-bye.